The name Alamo evokes images of frontiersmen in a glorious last stand. In reality, the winter of 1836 saw two freezing, desperate armies collide in a conflict defined by logistical failure and political extremism. The conflict was driven by a friction point in Mexican law. The government was centralizing its power and cracking down on American settlers who had entered Tejas illegally, bringing with them a system of slavery that Mexico had already abolished. These tensions reached a breaking point in late 1835. Local Texian rebels took up arms, pushed Mexican troops out of the region, and seized the Alamo, a crumbling Spanish mission that was never intended to be a fortress. General Santa Anna viewed this as a criminal uprising rather than a war. He issued the Tornel Decree, which legally defined the rebels as pirates. This meant that under Mexican law, any captured insurgent was subject to immediate execution. To enforce this decree, Santa Anna led his massive army of operations on a grueling march north, crossing hundreds of miles of difficult terrain to reach the disputed Texas border. The march was a disaster. The army walked directly into a record-breaking winter storm that dropped 15 inches of snow. Thousands of soldiers, many of them inexperienced recruits, suffered through hypothermia, dysentery, and constant raids by Comanche warriors. By the time the Mexican army reached San Antonio, they were as miserable and exhausted as the men they were sent to crush. This wasn't a gathering of heroes, it was a gathering of men trapped by brutal geography and uncompromising politics. Defending the Alamo was a mathematical impossibility. The sprawling 3-acre complex had a 1,320-foot perimeter. The Texian garrison had fewer than 200 men. This shows how thinly they were spread along the walls, leaving massive gaps vulnerable to attack. To make the walls functional, the Texians built makeshift catwalks. While these allowed the defenders to fire over the stone, the design left a rifleman's upper body completely exposed to Mexican sharpshooters. Their artillery was equally desperate. Lacking standard ammunition, the Texians packed their 19 cannons with whatever metal they could find: rusty, chopped-up horseshoes, heavy door hinges, and bent nails, effectively turning the cannons into giant shotguns. Outside the walls, the Mexican conscripts were living in a frozen hell. Their standard-issue uniforms were made of thin material, providing almost no protection as they shivered in the snow and mud. Despite the cold, the Mexican strategy was relentless. Every night, under the cover of darkness, they dragged their artillery batteries through the mud, inching them closer and closer to the mission walls. The 13-day siege was not a romantic standoff. It was a grueling test of endurance, where both sides were being hollowed out by the environment before the actual fighting even started. In the pre-dawn hours of March 6th, Santa Anna suddenly stopped his artillery bombardment. In the sudden silence, over 2,000 Mexican soldiers began a quiet advance to catch the exhausted Texians in their sleep. The attack was chaotic. The Mexican advancing columns were so tightly packed that untrained recruits in the rear panicked, blindly firing their muskets and accidentally shooting their own comrades in the back. The Texians responded with their scrap metal artillery, shredding the front lines of the Mexican columns. The entrance to the fort became a graveyard of metal and mud as the cannons fired point-blank into the crowd. But the defense couldn't hold. The sheer weight of the Mexican numbers eventually overwhelmed the north wall, and soldiers began pouring through the breaches and over the parapets. The Texians retreated from the walls into the barracks and the church. The battle shifted into these confined spaces, becoming a series of pitch-black, hand-to-hand fights. It was a primitive struggle of knives and bayonets. During this final slaughter, prominent figures like William B. Travis and James Bowie were killed alongside their men. Santa Anna's numbers had successfully broken the physical walls of the fort, but the breach ended in a disorganized slaughter, leaving the Mexican victory stained by the systematic execution of every surviving defender. By dawn, the Texian combatants were entirely wiped out. Santa Anna held firm to his no-quarter policy, ordering his men to bayonet the wounded and execute survivors who attempted to surrender. Santa Anna spared only a few non-combatants, like Susanna Dickinson. He didn't do this out of mercy, but for a specific purpose. He sent her east to warn the other colonies that resisting the Mexican army would lead to total annihilation. The news triggered a mass panic, known as the Runaway Scrape. Terrified civilians and the newly formed Texian government fled toward the United States, leaving their homes behind as the Mexican army advanced. But the brutality of the massacre backfired. Instead of breaking the rebels' spirit, the news of the executions turned a military defeat into a holy cause, enraging the settlers and drawing hundreds of new volunteers to the fight. 6 weeks later, that furious rage found a leader in Sam Houston. He gathered a furious, swelling army and caught Santa Anna's forces by surprise near the San Jacinto River. The Texians charged with a cry that had become their rallying point: "Remember the Alamo." They slaughtered the fleeing Mexican troops, winning the battle in just 18 minutes and capturing Santa Anna himself. While in captivity, Santa Anna was forced to order his remaining troops out of the region. This victory secured the independence of Texas and gave the new republic its first taste of international legitimacy. The Alamo was a tactical disaster, a massive, avoidable military loss for the Texian rebels. Yet the memory of that defeat provided the emotional momentum to win the war, showing that a potent symbol can outlast a battlefield victory.